Medieval times used to be amazing. Now it just sucks a fat bag.
This is the intro for the Hatcher show. He didn't want to do nothing, so he's standing there.
Greetings, my friends. We have gathered for a Hatcher travel vlog, specifically one decrying medieval times. I'm going to talk about the whole trip, but ultimately, this is a warning that the medieval times, at least in Toronto, is not worth going to. But let's start at the beginning of the trip on the bus ride up to Toronto, because we have to travel out of city for this experience. So you can enjoy the scenery as me and my lovely wife made our way up to the big, disgusting city of Toronto. I mean, aren't all big cities kind of grimy and disgusting mostly? There's some fun stuff, to be sure, nobody would be there, but ultimately they're not the best looking places. But depending on where you go, like our hotel for example, you can get a fun view through the scenic elevator. I find this to be a very novel concept, and I am easily wowed by things like this. While we were in Toronto, we went to Five Guys Burgers and Fries and got ourselves, obviously, some burger and fries, and as well, a whole bunch of peanuts. I love pilfering as many peanuts as I can from these guys from the free peanut box. But we'll take a look at my nut score later on in the video. We have more sights to take a look at. We had interesting foods not only to see on the shelves, but also to consume at certain points. There was weird goods I had never seen on all these different shelves in the stores there. And we found this place called the Octo Arcade. It's an arcade made for little girls with ridiculously named games. And guess what? We spent a fair bit of time and had a fair bit of fun there. So there will be a separate video talking about Octo so you can see the full little girl experience. That doesn't sound right. Anyways, keep your eyes peeled for when that comes out. On top of that, there were these amazing store displays. Check out these insane contraptions. One of the things I love about big cities is the resources that are involved trying to get people's attention can lead to some really impressive displays. So I found these to be quite enjoyable. And then back at the hotel for the night, we basically end up taking a look. Here's my peanut score. Nuts. Look at the glory. 3 full trays. Nobody does it nuttier than me, son. After that, it's just chilling in the hotel for the night, as you do, yelling at the dumbest shows on earth. Man, do I absolutely hate the state of current television. It is obnoxious. These fucking Radish Magoo idiots had fucking nothing with their reactions. It's worthless. The next morning, we get a good look around the hotel room. You can see the wanderings through the different rooms, the disarray, because why would we show you a nice, neat, tidy hotel room? What do you think this is? A professional operation? Nah, you get it the way that we've been using it. Deal with it. After that, we head on out. The scenic elevators were even more fun in the daytime when you can have a full-on proper view, including this really weird-looking but interesting statue that looks like a beast with 2 necks fighting a bunch of birds. After that, we headed off to the Eaton Center and visited the Danish pastry house. Then we went and took a look at a whole bunch of worthless crap in the GameStop. Man, do GameStop suck nowadays. You remember when they were places to get video games instead of just a warehouse for overpriced garbage? Then it was time for the main event, going to medieval times. We got there, got ourselves some overpriced drinks that I was okay with paying for at the time because I was really, really hyped. I have always loved medieval times since I was a small child and my aunt took me there. Medieval times was a magical place. It's this huge spectacle. They give you a meal, knights come out and battle each other in epic way, and they have a fun story running through the whole thing. And on top of that, they had some really good actors in terms of the guy who played the king and the chancellor. They made the experience really meaningful for me in previous visits. So for me, going to medieval times is a very big deal. That's the whole reason we went up to Toronto. That's the whole reason we rented a hotel room. So this trip was very expensive, and I ended up being very let down. Considering that I've been there a number of times, I can tell just how much the service has fallen off, and it started pretty much right from the get-go. Not exactly. We did get our drinks, and we did have the fun announcement from who I forever will call the king, but at this point they've downgraded him to a chancellor in the storyline. Now we'll get to that, but he's the guy who's been the king at previous visits. He does the royal proclamations in the booming, powerful voice that befits royalty.
My friend, are you ready for a tournament?
I absolutely love the guy who plays the king. So seeing him there doing his announcements at the beginning was actually pretty heartening. But getting your photograph taken, well, guess what? Previous times, you'd get to take your photo with the king and other members of the cast, but nope, this time around, you don't get to stand with anybody. I accept that the world's changed because of the whole shutdown of the world, the whole pandemic, all that. I get that that happened, but at the same time, it's a stark difference to stand there all alone, and then when they took the picture itself, they didn't bother to color correct it at all. So the picture looks absolutely abysmal. The previous time that I was at Medieval Times, the king and the chancellor had this fun little snippy back and forth going on between the two of them, and the king basically forced the chancellor to come get in the picture with us, even though the guy didn't want to. And that little back and forth added an extra dimension to it. It made it more fun. Every time I look at that picture, I think of how the king basically, if you look at it just from the worker level, the one worker was like, yo, I can make my coworker come and get in this picture, and he has to listen because I'm the king. And I was told those guys would end up swapping roles, so sometimes one gets to be the king, sometimes it's the other guy, and whoever's in charge, he's got to, yes, your majesty, and walk over. So he had to be a part of that picture, even though he really kind of didn't want to, but that all worked. It had the right kind of energy. It was fantastic. And so that created a genuine memory. And when you take a look at the two pictures side by side, it's such a stark difference of not only missing the cast members, but more importantly, the fact that the photo, they didn't even bother color correcting it, and it looks abysmal. I already paid for that photo, by the way, because when I signed up for this, I should say, I got the biggest, best package you could that includes the photograph included, because I definitely want the photograph. Last time it was super memorable, and this time it's super memorable as well, but for the opposite reason, a lack of care. They literally tried to make me pay for the photograph again. Instead of bringing the photograph up to me and going, here's the photograph you paid for, they walked up to me like, hey, do you want to pay for this? And I was like, I already paid for that. How do you not know this? And they just give me my photo, and I look at it, and it's just terrible. And at that point, I just looked, okay, it's par for the course, because that's the way it's been going for pretty much the entirety of once I got into the arena. So we get seated. We paid for front row seats, right? Paid for the photo, front row seats, because this is going to be a big, awesome spectacle. You sit at the front so you can get the best view of everything, right? And that will actually come back to a little bit. And when we talk about the terrible changes that they've made to the layout of Medieval Times. So what happens is I'm seated at the front, and they've changed the story of Medieval Times, and they would change the story up here and there to make it a little bit different, but it's the similar kind of formula where you're going to have all the knights of the kingdom competing in these different parts of the competition to win the king or queen's favor or the princess's favor, whoever it is, right? We're battling in a tournament for honor and glory, but there's no like real malice in it. And you have different knights. One knight is like an inexperienced knight, one knight is an old hand at it, one knight just kind of doesn't care. Like there's a whole different bit of characters that the different knights get to play that add another dimension to it. They do their thing, and then ultimately what happens is there'll be some kind of invasion, like another kingdom will invade, and then the people have to fight against these guys coming in, and there's smoke and craziness going on, and it's so cool, right? Because you got the king booming out, we will not be defeated level stuff. It's so awesome. So this time around, basically, what had happened, because I heard about behind the scenes, they tried to go one route with the story where they were going to go one of the 6 knights is actually a lady, and she's going to reveal herself and go, oh, I was the princess all along, and you thought that I couldn't battle like these dudes, but I can, and I stood my ground. And that would have been a satisfying style of the modern era story where they're trying to raise up women characters, right? So that's what Medieval Times tried to do, but ultimately that fell apart and they didn't get to do that. I would have loved that. What we got instead was this really unfortunate mishmash where the person in charge was the queen, but the story was the chancellor's talking to the queen and the queen goes, I'm not getting married. I don't need no man.
I will recommend a royal matchmaking this night. Let these princely knights entertain us on the field, and when we meet is my defender alone, with no other bargains shall be struck here.
And then the chancellor just goes, can I have some oranges?
Might we also trouble the good king?
Yes, fine, ask him for some oranges.
Your grace is wise beyond her years.
I wish I was making this up, but that's how the story goes. And then you have the person who, like I said, is the king. He's now the chancellor. He's been demoted, but he still makes the bold proclamations. He still gives the epic speeches.
With sword and shield is to know that the devil is loose. Never has he been vanquished in his labors upon the field of battle.
So when one guy reveals himself as a traitor, the chancellor goes, I strip you of your titles. You are banished from the realm. Go now in shame. Like one of those epic style speeches. And then the queen stomps her foot and goes, no, I'm in charge. I'm the one who makes the words and does the things. And what that guy said, but from me. And it's just like, you can't do this. You can't turn around and have a character up there who's supposed to be in charge, but there's nothing about her to respect because you haven't shown her doing anything. The entire show, she just sits there doing nothing but insisting she's in charge. And then they changed the villain aspect of the story to be like, okay, now instead of an invading kingdom, whatever, the one knight is angry because the queen's a woman. And they give that as the only reason that he's like, I hate you because you're a lady.
We will serve the princes of Castile, but should now fortune of the queen, I unwelcome intruder into the dominion of men.
But ultimately, during the show, you feel like the queen has no power and she's a petulant child. So it's only natural that none of these people would want to serve under her. She demands respect without earning it.
It is not within your power to refuse me, for knights are bound by oath to undertake such combat as this.
So the character feels hollow, empty, and meaningless. None of it rings true. And you're like, look, I'm not with him because he's like, I don't like it because you're a woman. But I'm with him in saying that you're not fit to rule because it's very clear that you're not. So, for me, story is a big part of things. It adds an extra layer. And without story being involved, Medieval Times, Carly called it, my wife called it a horse show to somebody else. And I went, Medieval Times isn't a horse show. It's an epic story that happens with a meal and knightly battles and stuff. But honestly, by the time we were done, I had to agree, it's just a horse show now. They just kept bringing out white horse after white horse after white horse after white horse that just kind of went boop boop and did a little like jump or something. Oh, I lifted my leg. That's all that happened. That's all that happened. And then when we get to the epic part of the show where it's like, okay, now it's time for the knight fighting. Yeah, smash your stuff against each other. Boom, go crazy, joust and do all that. I notice something's coming down from the sky. And I'm like, yo, what is that? What is that? This big fat wooden bar, and I'm like, what is there something on it? Comes down further. Oh no, there's mesh above it. What is this? Turns out they've installed mesh now to protect the audience from getting hit by things. Now, I wouldn't have a problem with the protective mesh if it wasn't made out of like black nylon material. The idiots in charge of it didn't choose to make a see-through material for the netting. So imagine going to a movie, and at the best part of the movie, they lower a chain link fence in front of it, because that's what this was the equivalent of. I may as well have been standing outside at a baseball game. So I paid for front row seats to see the show, and they put a chain link fence in front of my face, bro. And for some insane reason, the waitress there decided that the people at the very front who paid the most should get their food last. And the person down on my end at that very corner should get their food dead last. I was the last person in the entire building to get his food. I watched every other section get served, and I got served dead last in my section for everything. My dessert took so long to show up, I thought I wasn't even gonna get a dessert. The only time she came to me first was to give me the please give me a tip card. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? This is the worst experience I've ever had. The show, like the people in the show barely felt like they cared, half of them as well. And that part I probably could have accepted if everything else wasn't terrible. The only people who seemed like they were having a good time were people who were there as part of a corporate party where their bosses were paying to be there, and they were hammered. They were the only people having a good time. It was tepid at best. Medieval Times went from being this epic experience where I would tell everybody I knew, yo, go there. I love it. It's the best. I wish I could go all the time. And at the end of this show, when the once king yelled out, thanks for being here, and come back again to medieval times.
Magnificent audience this night, and I, Sir Richard, wish to thank you deeply. We wish you safe travels, my friends. We wish you Godspeed. And we pray that you all return soon to medieval times!
In my heart, I knew I never would. They robbed me blind. These tickets cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars on top of the hotel room because there's no way to get up to Toronto and get back in the same day for a show like this based on the times, right? So I literally had to get a hotel room and stay in the big city just to go to this. It was incredibly disappointing to the point where the special drinking horn that I bought at the beginning of the show, I threw it away because I don't want a memento of the garbage time that I have. I remember going to Medieval Times and picking up cool stuff every time I went. It was a big event. It was a big deal that I would look forward to, and I was super hyped about this. I went exactly 10 years from the day that I went the previous time, and I have those two photos, and side by side, it's the perfect emblem of the downfall of Medieval Times. It's so just very, very, very disheartening. So after the show, I end up tossing out the flags because it's like, what? Do you want these mementos?
This is what you get, Red and Yellow Knight, for being trash to us. We're throwing your flags out in disappointment.
It's true.
Clearly, you don't want those mementos as well. And then the next morning, one of the best parts of the trip was insulting the waitress at breakfast.
See, the way you say it sounds racist. Just so you know. Just so you know. So no racist toast things. Keep your hate mongering inside. I feel like under all this, you're just covered in swastikas. Like from head to toe, like everything. Like a giant one in the middle. Yeah,
no idea.
You hear ugly? There we go. That reaction, that was great. She wasn't giving me much one for most of it. I got you good there. That fucking
You
pause.
got me
Did you
too.
see it? I went for big air. Yeah,
you did.
Just straight up. I'm like, that was awesome. That was awesome.
And then after that, it was just killing time until the bus ride home. All right, my friends, I hope that you enjoyed this story time vlog. Medieval Times is the worst and can eat my sack. Bye.